Well, there's one thing for sure. It's certainly not getting easier to predict the EFL Championship this year. We are back today to look ahead to match week 6 of the 25-26 campaign. And my word, the way things are going, we're going to have a record low total across the season. We're going to look ahead to all 12 matches taking place over this weekend. And of course, we'll encourage you to do exactly the same down in the comments below. Give us your score predictions and your reasons why. If you beat or match my overall score each week, which shouldn't be that hard at the moment, you will get a shout out in the next episode when we return at the same time next week to look ahead to match week 7. That before the midweek fixture chaos begins. For now though, before we go and crack on with this weekend, let's have a quick look back at match week 5, where yet again it was low scoring across the board and there were some records being set in terms of our performance, both myself and across the comments section. For me, just 4 points overall, despite a few being lost late on. I got those for the wins for Ipswich, Bristol City and QPR, as well as the 2-2 draw between Preston and Middlesbrough. And to be honest, when I got 4 points this week, I didn't expect to be in the top half when it came to the predictions overall. But it's another low scoring week because if we look at the comment section, nobody scored more than 8 points, which is the joint lowest ever winning score in 5 years of doing this. It's also the first time that only 4 people have scored more than 6 points in a match week from over 30 commenters. And if we're being brutally honest, it was a really tough one to call. The average score this week was 3.4, which beats the record set earlier this season for the new lowest. Crazy scorelines, crazy results, but a few of you deserve a shout out, so let's give it to you. I was on 4 points level with Tio, Etienne and Marco, 3 of our regular players. 1 above us on 5 were Carl, Isaac, Steve and Keno. On 6, 4 of you tied, Swifty, Mitchell, Gordon and Peter. On 7, in joint second place, Poppy, Sven and Dave G. And then top of the tree with 2 perfect scores and 2 other correct outcomes. 8 points for Chris, the Carlisle fan, who this week, with 8 points, wins match week 5. It's not getting any easier to call. It's been a terrible season for pretty much all of us so far. So let's see if we can put that right on match week 6. Do we gamble and finally go higher scoring? Finally go for lots of away wins? No, I'm going to fall into the same trap again. Spoiler alert. Let's start with the Friday night football, as this weekend sees us spread across 4 days. And we begin with Middlesbrough versus West Bromwich Albion. Borough top of the table and preserve their unbeaten record just away at Preston North End. A 2-2 draw after almost throwing it away late on before a 92nd minute equaliser. Those 2 late goals costing me a perfect score incidentally. For Borough though, we've mentioned it this season. Yes, they've won every league game, but they've not been brilliant throughout. They did have a lot of the ball against Preston. They did have a lot of the territory and a lot of the chances, but didn't create too many clear-cut openings. In the end, again, did look a little susceptible to the break. So overall, I think they'll be pretty happy with a point and an unbeaten start. To be top after 5 games, certainly no mean feat. Of course, a little bit of discontent with the substitution situation and Rob Edwards having a little bit of a constructive go at the fans, which to be fair, he did early in his time at Luton to good effect as well. So I don't think there's too much of a headline there, albeit a few have made a big deal of it. On the flip side for West Brom, well, they'll be on the opposite side of it. They played pretty well against Derby. They dominated the game and somehow came out with a 1-0 defeat. Dominated the ball, dominated the chances, the territory, pretty much everything other than the goal scored column. They had the best chance of the match, but in the end, they conceded to Derby's one and only shot on target in the 84th minute. But it is something we've talked about a lot with West Brom over the years. Have they got that consistent cutting edge? And so that's the worry for West Brom, but it was a decent enough performance. And of course, prior to that, they hadn't lost a game this year. And given that, despite the fact that Borough conceded a couple of goals this time, they're yet to concede at home. West Brom away from home have been relatively solid for the most part. I know they had that crazy 3-2 at Wrexham, but otherwise they've been in a lot of low-scoring games, and I think they might as well here. The question I have to go for is who's most likely to have a player to unlock the door and produce a moment of magic, because it's got all the hallmarks of being a 0-0. Friday night games traditionally aren't the best on Sky Sports, but I'm going to go for Borough to produce that moment of magic and nick a 1-0 win at home to West Bromwich Albion, but I know a lot of you will go for 1-1 and probably gain some points on me here. Let's move on to the 3 early kickoffs on Saturday, starting with Birmingham City versus Swansea City. Swansea, let's start with the visitors, threw it away late on against Hull City. A 97th minute equaliser, costing me another point in the prediction show, as well as many of you too, of course. if we go and have a look at the stats of that game, then again, there wasn't a great deal in it. Swansea had a lot of the ball. Hull actually had more of the chances on the break. And for the first time, Swansea looked really open defensively, which is something that perhaps will be a little bit of a concern for them when they are forced to take the ascendancy in a game. Are they going to be able to dominate? Are they going to be able to be the aggressors? We're maybe seeing that there's some concern on that front. So maybe some slightly worrying signs after a generally positive start. But for Birmingham, maybe even more so. 3 defeats in a row without scoring, if you include the League Cup tie too. Yes, away at Leicester and away at Stoke, 2 of the tougher games they're going to face at the moment, 2 of the current top 4. But they didn't have a shot on target against Stoke. And one of the things I've said a lot this season is Birmingham, once they click and they take their chances, will be great because they're creating bundles of them. That didn't happen away at Stoke. They were forced to have a lot on the ball. They didn't have the chance to counter as much. It was a tactical masterclass from Mark Robins. And it was the one question I asked in the pre-season prediction show. This is going to be a bit more of a test for Chris Davis this year. And is he going to be able to make the team adaptable enough to cope? And maybe the first signs there were a little bit of a concern. But in this game, it's going to be a little bit different. I expect Birmingham to dominate the ball and the territory at home. Swansea City maybe don't offer as much of a consistent attacking threat. And that might mean they can gamble a little bit more. They've been brilliant at home in the league, to be fair. They dominated Sheffield United in the Cup. They played really well on the opening day against Ipswich and beat Oxford, but it took them a while to break them down. Swansea are getting in the habit of scoring recently, so I might give them a goal here. I think Birmingham will just about edge it. I'm going to go by 2-1. Let's move to the Midlands for the next early kickoff. It is 2 sides in the top 6 at the moment as Leicester City host Coventry City. For Coventry, it was, well, the great late escape against Norwich because in a game where they had an awful lot of the chances, again, didn't make it count, conceded the only shot on target they faced in the first half as Liam Manning set up his side really cautiously against them. But in the end, it almost worked. Coventry had so many clear-cut chances. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago, particularly after that 7-1 against QPR. Yes, it looks great that they're scoring goals galore, but they're overperforming their expected goals massively, and those strikers haven't always been consistent. Are they going to be able to do it every week? And the answer was no, because Coventry had 28 shots on goal, 4 clear-cut chances officially, and it took them to the 96th minute to score. So definitely concerns about consistency in front of goal. On the flip side of that, for Leicester, probably disappointed after 2 straight wins to get a 2-2 draw at Oxford, but then in the circumstances, playing, 65 minutes with 10 men, and to come back from 2-1 down, maybe they won't be so devastated. Important to keep that little unbeaten run going. It was a really important second half goal from Pereira. They fought well. They were probably second best for the most part, as you would expect to come under pressure against 10 men, but didn't give up too many great opportunities on their goal, kept a good shape, and probably showed a different facet to their game to what we've seen a lot of this season, where they've been expected to dominate and maybe haven't been ruthless enough to take their chances. Perhaps here, getting to play on the counter a bit suited them a little bit more, and it makes this one very hard to call because both of them have had a 2-2 draw in the last couple of weeks. Both of them have been scoring goals this season and creating almost as many chances as anyone in a championship. But there is a little bit of defensive frailty on both sides. As a result of that, despite me thinking Leicester might edge it, I'm going to go for a bit of a wild one here and throw in what is now the Championship's favourite scoreline this year of 2-2. And the final early kickoff sees 2 sides that have returned to form last weekend as it is QPR versus Stoke City. Stoke bounced back from going out of the Cup and their first league defeat of the season with a really good 1-0 win at home to Birmingham. And I mentioned a bit in the Birmingham section, the fact that they restricted them to no shots on target, let them have the ball and played in a different way is really encouraging. It's something we've not seen from Stoke probably since they came back down to the Championship, is genuine tactical versatility, winning in a different way and being able to stifle teams, something that they used to be really strong at in their Premier League years and prior to that. So starting to get the hallmarks of a good Stoke City side back, and Mark Robins doing an excellent job early in the season. Whether they can maintain it is the bigger question though. On the flip side, QPR back-to-back wins by 3-1, and what a hero they've unearthed in Richard Kone. Kone scoring a screamer in a 3-1 win, a really decent result for them away from home, and to be fair, a pretty okay performance. They created a lot on the break, they took lots of chances. You know Wrexham are going to be open based on their defensive record this year. The concern at the other end will be that they gave up a lot of opportunities, and on another day, a more ruthless attack could have scored 2, 3 or 4, and that's what we saw at Coventry when they played against one of those. But a good result for them, back-to-back wins, and starting to see the essence of a Julian Stefan team with that higher intensity and higher pace on the break. So definitely the striker that suits them, definitely better performances. And I can't really split these two. I know Stoke are flying, they're up in second spot. I've got a feeling, just a little inkling, that they might have their first draw of the year here. So I'm going to go for 1 goal apiece, the old Championship's favourite scoreline. Right then, just half of the games are Saturday 3 p.m. kickoffs, and we start with Blackburn Rovers versus Ipswich Town. Blackburn continuing their decent away form so far this year with a 1-0 victory away at Watford at the weekend. To be honest, it's been a decent start on the road for them, though their problems have largely come at home. Restricted Watford to just 1 shot on target, albeit they didn't take theirs early on in the game. And on the break, they looked a threat, which is something that Valérien Ismaël has done well there. And you go back to when he was at Barnsley and had that flying spell. They were a real handful away from home, so maybe not a huge surprise to see that at the moment. They were the better team. They deserved to win the game. Take a lot of credit for their performance there, because most people would have had Watford to win given their home record, including me. On the flip side, Ipswich Town, well, they came up against no resistance in Sheffield United. They saw for the end of Ruben Selles, probably the perfect time to play them. And obviously the first game of Mark McGuinness, who didn't cover himself in glory. But Ipswich Town were very good. They took advantage of what they were facing. We talked about the likes of Philogene, Clark and Schmodix finding form. Well, Philogene found it with absolute aplomb, didn't he? A hat-trick for him. Jack Clark got in on the scene as well, albeit with no real defensive pressure. A really good performance for Kieran McKenna's side. A bit more of the old Ipswich Town. And that does make this one harder to call, because for all of their brilliance on the road recently, Blackburn have been poor at home this year. They lost to Birmingham. They were heavily beaten by Norwich, and comfortably so. And Ipswich have just started to turn the screw when it comes to goal scoring. 2 against Derby, 5 against Sheffield United. I think it's going to start to click now. I'm going to go for Ipswich Town to win this one. I'm going to go for them to do so comfortably by 3-1. On to a game between two sides that pretty narrowly avoided relegation last year. It is Derby County versus Preston North End. Derby got their first win of the season. We mentioned it earlier on. That complete smash and grab at West Bromwich Albion. First shot on target in the 84th minute, but they were tight at the back. They hung in there. They fought for everything. It's what we see from John Eustace teams quite often. And while Derby are going to be slow in terms of progression to the team they want to be, we saw little signs, didn't we? Aguiman coming off the bench creating that goal. Vyman's got bundles of experience. He was a great signing for Eustace at Blackburn last year. The same again this time. Of course, Morris wasn't able to score this game, but Brereton Diaz involved as well. There's a lot of attacking talent. I think at home, they're going to be particularly useful now with those players all in and starting to find fitness. For Preston, they'll be pretty devastated in the end, because there were moments from beating Middlesbrough. Probably wouldn't have been deserved. They were largely second best in the game, didn't create a great deal of chances and didn't have a lot of the ball, but they fought till late on. They got themselves ahead, and they'll be really upset that they didn't cling on. But in the end, they can't be too disappointed to have got a draw out of that game. But this one becomes a lot harder to call, because Preston, always a solid side on the road. The onus will be on Derby, which is when they've at times struggled this season. I think I have to sit on the fence. They're two sides that I can't really separate at the moment. I'm going to go for the old Championship's favourite scoreline again. A 1-1 draw between these two. Let's move on to two sides that haven't had the best of starts to the season. It is Hull City versus Southampton. We'll start with Hull City, who fought back to get that very late equaliser against Swansea. And you have to say, deservedly so. They played pretty well in that match. They were the better team. They had the better chances. Gave up a lot of the ball and hit on the counter. We actually talked last week when we were previewing this game about the performance at Sheffield United last year, where they played on the counter like that. It was a very similar style of performance, actually. Created a lot, didn't take all of their chances, but again, defensively, faced 2 shots on target, conceded 2 goals. They've got to be better at the back. It's been an Achilles heel for them ever since the opening day at Coventry, where they did really well. And since then, we've seen them concede 3-2, 3-4-2. It's not going to be good enough over the season, and it's going to put them bang in trouble, especially when you consider that their defensive record kept them up last year. Whereas for Southampton, well, the problem was more at the other end, wasn't it? After encouraging signs in the last 2 games in League and Cup, We watched it on our FM stream, and Pompey were by far the better team in the first half, getting deliveries in the box, being threatening without creating too many clear-cut opportunities. And then in the second, Saints, yeah, they huffed and puffed. They had a bit of pressure. They had a bit of the ball, but it didn't look like scoring. It's just not quite clicked yet. It's a little bit disjointed, but a clean sheet, another point on the board. They've only lost one game this season. They've got to start turning some of those draws into victory soon. Do I think they'll do so here? Perhaps they will, because for Hull City, yes, they looked a threat on the road, particularly at Wrexham in the Cup, at Bristol City and Swansea the last 2 weeks. But at home, they do struggle for goals a little bit. I know they had that wild game against Oxford, but they were beaten heavily by Blackburn. I think Southampton will be able to keep them out. So I'm going to go for the Saints to nick a 1-0 away win in what I don't think will be one of the better games of the weekend. On the flip side, the next game is where I'm banking on goals. It is Carrow Road for Norwich City versus Wrexham. And Norwich were involved in a frustrating day at Coventry, weren't they? It was a really weird performance, actually. The sort of one that got David Wagner the sack despite being in the playoffs. The sort of one that caused frustration for Bristol City fans despite Liam Manning doing really well. One shot on target at Coventry. Yes, they scored from it. And then basically just parked the bus for 70 minutes. I don't think I'm exaggerating too much there. Didn't create another shot on goal. Coventry on another day could have had 4 or 5. They had so many clear-cut chances. They had 28 shots on goal. And it was really a fortunate escape for Norwich, despite conceding late on, that they came out of that with a draw. Yes, they hung in there and they fought hard, but they've got to be better than that. You can't face that many opportunities. I'd be a little bit worried about them on the road. We mentioned their record away from home's been really poor for years in the Championship. They've got to find a way to do better, especially after that good win at Blackburn. You thought it was something to build on, but it turns out that actually playing against 10 men is the only thing that made that happen. However, they will be relieved to know that they're back at home this weekend and they're facing a Wrexham side who, defensively, are pretty abysmal. Of course, they had that first win against Millwall to build on and didn't do so at all. Against QPR, yes, they created lots of chances and on another day could have scored more again. There is no doubt that they've got a big threat going forward. They're going to be entertaining to watch, but it's just not good enough at the back for Wrexham. And I know there's a lot of new signings to settle and it'll maybe take a month or so to see the best of them back there, but I'm really worried for them at the moment. For this game, I think it's going to be goals galore at both ends. Josh Sargent is firing and at home, I think he'll do really well here. I'm going to go for Norwich City to win a crazy game pretty comfortably. I'm going to go for the bonkers match and scoreline of the weekend because there's been so many anyway. I'm going to go for Norwich City to win by 4-2. The penultimate 3 p.m. kickoff sees Portsmouth face Sheffield Wednesday. Two sides that have had different starts to the season. I think we expected what is now happening for Sheffield Wednesday, which is struggle when they go behind in a game. It's something we talked about in that Henrik Pedersen special and what's going on at Sheffield Wednesday. It's going to be fine when they're in games, but if you concede a fairly early goal, if you go a couple down, then what happens? And to be honest, it was a training session for Bristol City. They raced into a 3-0 lead after half an hour, and Sheffield Wednesday couldn't offer anything back. You have to feel for them because they're running really hard. They're working for the team, but when you go past the starting 11, there's not a lot there. Of course, they're bringing on players with a little bit of experience, but there's not a great deal in that squad. It's very tough for them to compete. No shot on target, no goal. Bristol City dominant without being spectacular. A difficult day for Sheffield Wednesday. For Portsmouth, we mentioned they'll be the happier of the two in that South Coast derby. They restricted Southampton to next to nothing, defended pretty well when they had to, and on the break in the first half in particular looked a threat. Josh Murphy was having good fun on that left-hand side. Bishop nearly got on the end of a couple, and they played the game perfectly. I think we are going to see a slightly improved Portsmouth on the road this year. This is the sort of game they've got to win. At home to a side that will almost certainly finish bottom this year. They've got to keep themselves away from trouble. They're unbeaten in 3. They've not conceded in their last 2. I don't think they concede here either. I'm going for Portsmouth to win comfortably at Fratton Park by 2-0. And the final 3 p.m. kickoff sees the first new manager of the season. But, well, is it really new? Because 6 games after he was sacked, Chris Wilder is back in a Sheffield United dugout as they host Charlton Athletic. You can find that manager special up in the eye above. I mean, we all knew it was the wrong decision in the summer. We all knew he shouldn't have been sacked, and they go straight to get him back because I think they realise that actually maybe they need to eat a little bit of humble pie. So the ownership have reappointed Chris Wilder. We won't talk about it too much as we only did that video a couple of days ago. But let's have a look at the stats going into this one because Sheffield United were abysmal against Ipswich on Friday night. Defensively, they gave up for a lot of the goals. It's the one thing as a football fan that you really hate, isn't it? Most of us can accept defeat if your team are trying, unless you're one of the top sides in the world. You can accept that you're going to get beaten some weeks, especially away at a promotion rival at the start of the season. But the manner of the goals, the fact that they weren't even sprinting to get back in position, they were just letting men go, they were jogging back, is so frustrating. And look, it was a terrible performance, but I think we can officially say the season probably starts now for the Blades. For Charlton, they stopped the rot with a 1-1 draw at home to Millwall. Yes, a red card and then conceding late will be disappointing, but it's a point on the board. They're important for them at this stage of the season. I think we're going to see more from them in the next few weeks, particularly with the likes of Bree and Burke coming in and getting fit now. But for Charlton, a decent point, they're doing okay. And this game becomes a difficult one because we're going to see a response from Sheffield United. The fans will be right behind Chris Wilder. A lot of them didn't want him out in the summer. And are we now going to see them get on a roll? He's not got the team he had to work with before. There are some poor players or some poor attitudes in that team as we've seen in recent weeks. But I think he'll galvanise them. I think the fans will be behind them. And it'll be enough to just get them a win. I don't think it's going to be convincing or exciting to watch. Because, let's be honest, a lot of last year they were efficient rather than brilliant. I'm going to go for them to edge a narrow game here at Bramall Lane with a 2-1 victory against Charlton Athletic. 2 to go, and we move on to Sunday for our penultimate match as Bristol City host Oxford United. Bristol City becoming very good in front of goal. I know a few people having a pop at me in the comments for suggesting they're not the best defensively because they've only conceded 4 in 5 games. However, they are the team most overperforming their expected goals this year, and defensively, they have given up chances, albeit not against a very poor and hapless Sheffield Wednesday team. It was a very comfortable game. I mentioned it was like a training session a bit earlier on. Did the job. A lot of teams are going to be expected to do that against Wednesday this year. You've got to go out and do it. And Bristol City did after a performance that was a little more concerning, particularly defensively at home to Hull. They'll be relieved to have made it so easy and so comfortable away at Hillsborough. On the flip side, if we look at Oxford, back-to-back 2-2 draws, which is encouragement in terms of creating chances, getting into games. But after going ahead at half-time against 10 men, they'll be really gutted they haven't won that match. And while they did have a bit more of the territory, while they had plenty more shots than Leicester, they weren't really creating a huge amount. And again, taking clear-cut chances is going to be a problem for them this year. Good for Lancashire to get a goal. That will be important moving forward. But little bit worried about Oxford based on what I've seen so far. Away from home is where they struggled the most last season. Their 2 points this year have come at home. Bristol City have not yet lost a game away from home either. They're still unbeaten in the league, only lost at Fulham in the Cup. And they're scoring goals for fun. So I don't think it's going to be quite as open this game. I think Oxford will play to frustrate as they tried to away at Birmingham a few weeks prior. And I think they would try and take a 0-0. I'm not sure they get it. I think Bristol City might produce a moment of magic with players like Scott Twine, who can just unlock a door when need be, with Mehmeti in form as well. I think one of them might pop up with a goal. So I'm going to go for Bristol City to nick it by 1-0. And the final game on Monday Night Football, a strange choice you might say, is Millwall versus Watford. Two sides that have had steady, if unspectacular, starts to the season. Millwall, that 1-1 draw away at Charlton with the late equaliser against 10 men. Certainly not their best performance, but probably a fair result overall. We've seen a bit of the sublime and the ridiculous from them so far. Not able to get over the line against Wrexham. Weird second half capitulation against Middlesbrough, but then excellent performances against some of the other teams they've faced. So a little bit of a hit and miss start for them, but I would expect to see a good season still. For Watford, bit worried about that home performance against Blackburn as the sun comes out to only have one shot on target. So they're not really creating an awful lot, and to look so ropey on the counter, it's definitely a concern. Blackburn deserved to win that game. They had the better chances, and to be honest, Watford's strength was their home form, so I'd be a little worried about that if I were them. They have, though, had an okay start regardless, still picked up points against QPR, Southampton, Swansea, etc. Away from home, though, they've not looked brilliant for the most part, and Millwall are normally fairly strong at home, albeit we've not seen too much evidence of that this year with their 2 wins coming away from home in the league. I'm going to go for this one to be a home win, I think, because look, when Millwall are at their best, they're formidable at home. Watford have not shown many signs on the road, and while it could be a fairly tight game, I think they might have to chase it late on if they're 1 down. Millwall are so strong from set pieces. They're so good at getting the ball in the box, and if they hit form, if they create the chances they have in some of their matches, I think they will win this one. So I'm going to go for Millwall by 2-0. I wouldn't be shocked if Watford get an early one and are then able to hold on. With that out of the way then, let's have a quick recap of what I've gone for this weekend. I guess the headline news is that there will be no teams on 0 points at the end of this match week because I'm going for Chris Wilder to have an instant impact at Sheffield United with a 2-1 win in his first game back in charge. I've gone for a crazy game of the weekend between Norwich City and Wrexham, 4-2 at Carrow Road, Ipswich to get 3 away on the road at Blackburn, and I am now embracing the new Championship's favourite scoreline of 2-2 with a big exciting draw between Leicester City and Coventry in the Midlands. But those are just my predictions for match week 6. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments below. I mean, at this point, you might as well go for anything because none of us are picking up points at the minute. If you enjoyed this one, please do chuck a thumbs up on it, subscribe, turn that notification bell on to make sure you don't miss the rest. A quick mention to say you can pre-order FM26 via our Fanatical link. It does help support the channel and gets you money off. That link in the description below or the eye above. For now though, a massive thanks for watching. Check out Monday's Manager Special if you haven't seen it already. And we'll be back here at the same time next week to look ahead to match week 7.